Welcome in everybody to week 14 Dynasty Lessons Learned. This is basically going to be the same thing as last week, where it's kind of like this newer, kind of middle of the road video from not doing every single game, but also not just talking through just a couple of players and lessons learned. I have 5 players that we're going through and talking about this week because it was by apocalypse. We didn't have every single game, so I only have 5 this week compared to 6 last week. But anyway, um, let's get right into it, huh? First one we want to talk about from the Thursday night game is Jayden Reed. And I actually tweeted this out after the game on Thursday night that, his numbers from 2023 to where they are for pacing for 2025 after 12 or 13 games played so far for him is really not all that significantly better. Last year in 16 games, he put up 64 receptions for almost 800 yards and 8 touchdowns plus another 120 and 2 on the ground on 94 targets. This year, for a 17-game pace, he is on pace for almost 60 receptions, 900 yards, and 8 touchdowns, plus almost 170 and a touchdown through or on the ground on 77 targets. So more yards per reception, more yards per target. We love to see that. Same number of touchdowns, still basically, at least through the air, same number of touchdowns he's on pace for. But fewer total targets overall, like almost 20 fewer targets this year than what he had last year. And I think that this might just need to be a reality that we need to accept, is that Jayden Reed might be hamstrung by the offense that he's in, by the number of weapons that are in this Packers offense. That, I fully believe that Jayden Reed is without a doubt the best wide receiver on the Packers, but I don't know if he is that much better than everybody else. Like how how CeeDee Lamb is that much better than everybody else on the team. How Amon-Ra is that much better than everybody else on the team. How George Pickens is that much better than everybody else on the team. Like the difference between Jayden Reed and Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks, I think, is marginal steps between all 4 of them, especially whenever you also throw in Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs out of the backfield. There's just so many weapons on this team that the ball can go any number of which ways. And it's not necessarily always going to go through Jayden Reed. Plus, he's primarily playing through the slot. I think he only has like 10 or 15% of his snaps played out wide. So the other, 85 to 90% are from the slot this year. That's just not really conducive to fantasy points. It really hasn't been conducive to fantasy points for wide receivers just in general for fantasy football. So I think right now we just need to maybe accept that Jayden Reed is just potentially not a top 25 dynasty wide receiver, which really sucks because, like I said, he is like extremely talented. He is a very, very good wide receiver. But I mean, we've seen the situation play out a number of times. We've seen it with, Terry McLaurin up until this past year, with DJ Moore, and those were quarterback issues more or less. But we've seen really good wide receivers be hamstrung by the offenses and the situations that they've been in. And those wide receivers were topping 1,000 yards out of the gate, essentially, and they were perennial 1,000-yard wide receivers. We haven't even gotten a year with over 1,000 yards for Jayden Reed. He is pacing this year for just over 906. So it's not like we're talking about Jayden Reed as some, perennial 1,000-yard guy either. He's on pace to barely break 900 as a career high this year through 2 years. So I think that that's just all indicative of the fact that Jayden Reed might not be a top 25 dynasty wide receiver. On Keep Trade Cut right now, he is the wide receiver 22. So he's basically on that fringe border of what I'm saying of him not being a top 25 guy. Players behind him that I would prefer over Jayden Reed would include Jalen Waddle still, maybe Terry McLaurin, especially if you're a contender. Jordan Addison has gotten at least a lot more work this year, and maybe we'll see what he does depending on the quarterback situation moving forward, if they stick with Sam Darnold or if they move to JJ McCarthy. Brandon Ayuk is behind him. That right there, those 3 players move Jayden Reed to wide receiver 25. Plus, you got Chris Olave and DJ Moore and the what ifs of Tank Dell and Josh Downs and Xavier Worthy, like all these other guys behind him that could potentially push Jayden Reed a little bit down. He's definitely not outside the top 30, but around or slightly below the top 25, I think that's where Jayden Reed kind of lives, which, like I said, for like the 3rd time, super unfortunate because he is super talented, but it might be a good time to pivot off of him right now and move over to some other wide receivers that maybe have more upside, more consistency. Try to see if you can move to T. Higgins. Try to see if you can move to DK Metcalf or Devonta Smith or Jalen Waddle, or buy low on George Pickens while he's injured. Buy low on Rashee Rice while he's injured. Buy low on Brandon Ayuk while he's injured. Those are the opportunities and players that I think I would like to look to pivot off of Jayden Reed right now. Maybe not now. Maybe now is not the best time because he just is coming off of donut. But the first week that he goes back and putting up 80 to 90 yards, scores a touchdown, looks like a wide receiver one for Green Bay. Maybe that's a time then that you can sell Jayden Reed for a better, more consistent option on a weekly basis. And it sucks because Jayden Reed's really good. Moving on, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. We got to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. It's been an absolute struggle all year. The inconsistencies are just racking up, and it's really, really annoying. He wasn't even that bad this past week, but it's just like as a whole, the season on a whole is just not what we wanted it to be for Marvin Harrison Jr. His 17-game pace right now is 60 receptions for 850 yards, 9 touchdowns, which you likes to see, but 9 touchdowns on 60 receptions, only 850 yards. Like that's really heavy touchdown production. And that's where a lot of his fantasy points and production is really coming from. And 112 targets isn't bad, but it feels like only 112 targets in this offense where it really just seems like it should be him and Trey McBride, and only 112 targets. Maybe that's a situation issue. Maybe that's a Kyler Murray issue. I don't really know. The season, with how bad it's been and where the pacing has been, that he's not even pacing for a 900-yard receiver, let alone 1,000 receiver. It's definitely not like a damning season. Like if he was under 500, how much we hate rookie wide receivers with under 500 yards, but rookie wide receivers under 900 yards, even for a top 10 rookie wide receiver, top 10 drafted rookie wide receiver, it's not a damning season. I went and looked at other top 10 rookies that had under 900 yards. And that list includes Megatron, which we know the story there. Larry Fitzgerald, we know the story there. Those two are really the big hits on that list. But then the other ones, Braylon Edwards back from the mid-2000s, Roy Williams from the mid-2000s, Michael Crabtree, and then most recently Drake London. Those other 4 players, this make up 2/3, 66% of this list, are really, really interesting because they are all very, very similar. Braylon Edwards, year 3 breakout, didn't have over 900 yards, I think, in his first 2 years. Year 3, 1,000 or 1,100 yard season. Roy Williams basically is the same story. Michael Crabtree took until year 4 to get his first 1,000-yard season. And now Drake London was basically the same as a rookie as he was in his second year. Now seems like he's going to be breaking 1,000 yards this season with 4 games left. He should get over that. He only needs 140 more yards. So he's going to have his breakout third-year season this year. So the story there with all 4 of those other guys is it seems like it might take a little bit longer, and we need to be a little bit more patient on Marvin Harrison Jr. to really, really get that kind of breakout season. Maybe it's, a Devonta Adams situation or a Drake London situation, or, one of those kind of things, a Chris Godwin situation where we need to be a little bit more patient with him and he follows a more traditional wide receiver growth into the NFL as a third-year breakout. And that might be the case for Marvin Harrison Jr., which is totally fine. Like I said, like Braylon Edwards was pretty solid after his year 3. Roy Williams, kind of solid after year 3. Crabtree had a few good seasons in San Francisco, a few good seasons in Oakland. Drake London, we'll see what happens with him. Of course, if he turns into Megatron and fits, then that's not really going to be an issue whatsoever. But I just don't know if if this is the roadmap that we're looking at for Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know if I have the patience to wait for Marvin Harrison Jr. to become Marvin Harrison Jr., given his current dynasty value. His KTC value right now, he is still wide receiver 8. He's 1 spot behind Puka, 2 spots behind Nico, 3 spots behind CeeDee Lamb, and he's 1 spot ahead of A.J. Brown. I just don't know if I'm still willing to put Marvin Harrison Jr. that high when all those other wide receivers are producing so far and away phenomenally better than Marvin Harrison Jr. is right now. And I don't know, if I've got to wait until 2026 for him to have his, Nico Collins kind of year 3 breakout, or his CeeDee Lamb year 3 explosive, massive breakout. I don't know if I can wait that long for Marvin Harrison Jr., given the value that he's already valued like that, when I can just, it feels like kind of easily move from Marvin Harrison Jr. over to Nico or over to Puka or maybe over to Lamb while Cooper Rush is playing right now, even though Lamb is still producing. Even over to like Malik Neighbors or AJ Brown, or maybe you can move down from Marvin Harrison Jr. and get Garrett Wilson or Drake London or Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like that's, I think, the issue that I have with Marv right now is not him as the player and not even so much the production. It's just the value still surrounding Marvin Harrison Jr. given the production that he's had so far as a rookie. I'm definitely not out on him. Like I said, I don't think that this season is damning. I don't think that it's any indication that he can't succeed in the future because all those other wide receivers succeeded in the future. But if it takes a little bit longer, I don't know if I have the patience for that, given how easy it seems to move over to another just so elite wide receiver right now in Dynasty, that I think that's the way to go. I wouldn't be selling like if somebody was like, oh, would you take T Higgins in a second for Marv? I'd be like, nah, just keep Marv, but like I want to move to another elite guy. That's the end of the story here. Now, just talk on another rookie wide receiver in Rome Odunze. I got a lot of questions about Rome Odunze last Friday. I think I got like 3 or 4 in the Friday AMA last week, maybe even another one in the comment section or something like that. So I've been getting asked a lot about what to do with Rome Odunze, which is kind of weird to me because I felt like everybody that drafted him knew what they were getting. I thought that we knew that we were getting JSN 2.0, that he was drafted into an offense that already had DJ Moore, already had Keenan Allen, had a rookie quarterback. Even as great as that quarterback was coming out of college as a prospect, it's still a rookie quarterback that's going to, have to grow and develop into the NFL. And plus, we also knew that I feel like the coaching staff wasn't necessarily super ideal, considering that the offensive coordinator for the Bears was the offensive coordinator coming from Seattle that hindered Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. So the parallels were just all over the place for Rome Odunze to JSN. So I think it's weird that people, I don't know if they're panicking or if they're concerned or if they think that this is just what Rome Odunze is. None of that, in my opinion, is the case for Rome Odunze. This is what we expected from him. But he's still fantastic. He just this past week, he had 20 fantasy points, 2 touchdowns, but 20 fantasy points. And if you look at his 17 game pace, 106 targets, 60 receptions, 760 yards, and 4 touchdowns. If you look, that number is nearly identical to Marvin Harrison Jr. right now. Remember this: 60 for 765 and 4. Marvin Harrison Jr., 60 for 850 and 9. So just a few more yards, basically double the touchdowns. That's where Marv has been thriving, like I said, which may or may not be a good thing, given the target total that he's been receiving. But 6 fewer targets for Rome, basically the same number of receptions, 90 fewer yards, and half as many touchdowns. It's the same thing, but Rome Odunze is in a way worse situation. He's competing with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. Marvin Harrison Jr. is competing with essentially Kyler Murray. It feels like that's the only difference between the two, and Trey McBride. But it really just feels like it's a Marv issue, not a situational issue like Rome Odunze. So the fact that Odunze is doing this as the third option is very, very is very good in my opinion for him. It improves the confidence a lot for my prospects of Rome Odunze moving forward after this season. Maybe we'll see what happens with Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's a free agent at the end of the year. Maybe they retain him for cheap. Maybe he goes and tries to go get to be on a contender or something next year. And Rome Odunze is then the number 2. Maybe they get a good offensive coordinator coming in, like the Seahawks did with Ryan Grubb, and now he's opening things up. JSN is almost a dynasty wide receiver 1 in KTC. He's wide receiver 13. So that's what happened with JSN. Maybe the same thing is going to happen to Rome Odunze because he is still so immensely talented that we just need the situation and the coaching staff to really open things up a little bit more for Odunze. And that could happen as early as next season with just a couple small changes, more or less. So bye, Rome Odunze. All right. Now, just to talk about Puka Nacua real quick, I just had to talk about him because he is so freaking good that it's just become unacceptable, I think, to not value him as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. If not even, in my opinion, I think he's top 3. I think he is the wide receiver 3. I think I could have debated between him and Jamar Chase as the wide receiver 2 behind Justin Jefferson. But then Monday night happened. So there there's that. Jamar Chase is so freaking good, and he's tied to Joe Burrow for the foreseeable future. Puka doesn't have that luxury of being tied to a mid-20s wide quarterback. He's tied to a mid-30s quarterback. But we'll get to that in just a second. But Puka Nacua is phenomenal. His 17-game pace over the entire season is 115 receptions for 1,500 yards and 6 touchdowns. That is better than his 2023 season. His 2023 season last year, he didn't top 1,500 yards. Hold on, I thought I had the tab up, but I did not. His season last year was 105 receptions for just under 1,500 yards and 6 touchdowns. And he's on pace for over 1,500 yards on 10 more receptions and basically the same number of touchdowns on the entire year. Now, if we look since week 7, since he returned from his injury, not including the week 1 when he kind of got hurt and didn't play all that much, but since he returned from injury, and again, still including a game where he only played a third of the snaps because he got ejected. But since week 7, he's on pace for 120 receptions for over 1,600 yards and 7 touchdowns on 172 targets. That is way better than 2023. That is phenomenal. And that, in my opinion, is what is leading me to want to put him as the Dynasty wide receiver 3, ahead of CeeDee Lamb, ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Listen, I think that he is in a tier with all of those guys. It's one big tier. You can throw Nico Collins into that tier as well, maybe even AJ Brown. I think it's all one giant tier. How you order them is completely up to you, and I really have no issues if you prefer Amon-Ra or Nico or CeeDee Lamb over Puka. I just think Puka is really, really good. And as we get into the offseason and with startups happening, I think I'd be hard-pressed to not pick Puka Nacua in the first round of startups or even at the 1-2 turn in Superflex startups as a top 3 or 4 Dynasty wide receiver, like ahead of Amon-Ra and ahead of Nico. And it's just, that's how I feel with him for startups. For trades in already established leagues, like I don't think I would trade Amon-Ra for Puka. I probably wouldn't trade Nico for Puka. I wouldn't do it in reverse either. But if you already have one of those elite guys, I don't really think it makes sense to move over to Puka. But Puka, from a startup standpoint, I think is a top 3 or 4 Dynasty wide receiver. He is so freaking good. And I don't care about what happens post Matthew Stafford. I hinted about that at the beginning. That seems to be everybody's main issue with Puka right now is the situation with Matthew Stafford. But Stafford's still under contract for 2 more years. So it might not be until 2027 that Puka is in a new situation with a new quarterback, maybe new offense, because McVay is always rumored about what is he going to do? Is he going to continue coaching or whatever? I don't know. I'm not trying to predict that, especially 3 years in the future. But say it's just 2027 that we get a new quarterback for the LA Rams. At that point, I would trust Puka Nacua's talent level. I would trust Sean McVay, assuming that he's still the head coach in the offensive mind there. It's the same situation and argument that I had with Justin Jefferson coming into the year, that I trust Justin Jefferson. I trusted Kevin O'Connell. Whoever the quarterback was didn't really necessarily matter because I trusted the other 2 way more than that. And now Sam Darnold appears to be doing pretty well. So assuming the Rams get a Sam Darnold level quarterback, I trust Puka. I trust Sean McVay. I'm not worried about what happens post Matthew Stafford. And that's what's giving me the confidence to rank Puka as a top 5, if not top 3 Dynasty wide receiver. He is so freaking good. It's unbelievable how good he is. And then this is the final one. Yeah, this is the final slide here. Just to talk about, because last week felt like I talked about all running backs. This week feels like I'm talking about all wide receivers. That's just kind of how the nature of the weeks kind of went. But to throw a running back in this week with Rico Dowdle, he's been on an absolute tear recently. I mean, he's rushed for over 85 yards in each of the past 3 weeks. He's rushed for over 110 yards in each of the past 2 weeks. And he's had 2 or 3 receptions, I think, in all 3 of those games as well. His post-bye week 17-game pace, so from, I think, week 8 or 9 on, would be 264 carries for almost 1,400 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. The offense kind of sucks, so he's not getting the rushing touchdowns. But 1,400 yards almost, plus another 200 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air. So over 1,500 yards, almost 1,600 total yards and 6 touchdowns. Pretty solid pace for Rico Dowdle. Now, he has been really good, but will it continue? That is the big question. It really feels like I compared him to discount Chase Brown right now. Both of these guys are sort of ish young. Rico is currently 23 where is he? 26 years old. Chase Brown's a couple years younger. But they're both relatively young. It seems like not a lot of tread on the tires. So there's a good argument for that as well. But it just seems like that they have been getting so much work recently. They've been so productive lately. And we just don't know if it's going to continue for either one of them. I'm really not sure if either one of the two are week one starters for 2025. I would like to predict that Chase Brown is a week one starter for Cincy. We talked about that last week. So if you missed that last week, you can hear more of my takes on Chase Brown. And I think that Rico has a decent shot of being the week one starter for 2025. I fear he won't be. I feel like he's got a decent shot because it's Dallas, it's Jerry Jones. Maybe they see enough out of Rico that then they can just fix some other holes that they have on their offense, and who knows what they do with Dak and blah, blah, blah. But who really knows? It's Dallas. I will say, though, it feels like Rico Dowdle at price is a better stash for 2025 on the hope that he is a starter than Chase Brown, again, at price. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when I look at KTC rankings, Chase Brown is the RB13 still, just like he was last week. Rico Dowdle, I actually had to scroll down. I thought I missed him. And then I just kept scrolling. He's gained a lot of value, but he's still only the RB40. Like, he's still valued behind Jalen Wright and Isaac Garendo and Zach Charbonnet and Rashad White and Blake Corum and Jalen Warren. He's one spot ahead of Audric Estime and Ray Davis and Javonte Williams. At that price, I just don't know if it's even worth selling off of Dowdle for the upside if he is still the RB1 next year. That's kind of how I feel. And that's why, like, I think, the opportunity cost that if Chase Brown and Rico Dowdle were to both not necessarily like lose their jobs, but to get competition and not be the surefire week one starter next year, the opportunity cost is way greater on Chase Brown, given his RB13 price point, that it doesn't seem all that difficult to move up to a Kyron Williams or, a James Cook or even like a Devon Achane or somebody like that. Then Rico Dowdle, that your opportunity cost would be like a handcuff, because he's valued in handcuff range. So if they add another competition player in and then Rico just becomes a good handcuff, well, that's already how he's valued. But then you get the upside of him being a starter next year. So I think that he is a hold. I don't think I'm actually going out and buying Rico Dowdle right now. Maybe if you can get him for a late second, late second. If you don't have a deadline, you still have your second round pick. You're a championship caliber team in the playoffs right now. Then I think I would buy Rico Dowdle for the production for the remainder of the year, then the upside in the offseason if he is a starter. But once we get into the offseason, for any of you out there who are already past your deadline, I don't think I would go and buy Rico. Maybe for a couple of thirds I would, but I don't think Rico would be a trade target for me. But just as much as that, he's not really a sell for me either. I think he's just a firm hold right now, maybe a buy if you haven't passed your deadline already and you are a championship caliber team that maybe needs an extra running back this year for the production that he'll give you over the next 4 weeks. So that's kind of where I'm at with Rico Dowdle right now and the other wide receivers that we talked to. So that is the end of week 14 Dynasty lessons learned. Appreciate everybody for sticking around and watching the video. If you got to this point already, again, Friday AMA, same time, Friday afternoon, 12 p.m. Eastern time this week. So I will catch you guys there. Hopefully we can help you guys get started right in the fantasy playoffs, with the fantasy playoffs starting this week. Or if you have a first round bye, congratulations on that too. But Friday AMA, 12 p.m. Eastern time. And until then, guys, we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.